This is Nate, and I'm gonna give you my race report for the Boulder, Colorado Ironman 2019. Um, so I'll give you a little background on some of my training leading up to it, and my taper, and then actual race report, and which led to a fifth place finish for 35 to 39, and was good enough to qualify for Kona. Got very lucky there. So my training, I've planned on doing this race for about a year, and so I did this race in 2016, and I wasn't really trying to qualify for Kona, but I came in 10th place in my age group with 10 hours, and I was 10:19, and I had still trained quite a bit, but I wasn't fully invested in qualifying for Kona. And so after that, I really wanted to qualify for Kona. I knew that I was right there, and I just had a few things that I needed to work on, mainly swimming and biking and running better. But mostly it was my run. I think my marathon time was just right at 4 hours, or just right under 4 hours, which I knew wasn't going to cut it. My bike has always been strong, and my swim is very weak. So I knew I could cut off the most time on the run and keep the bike just about the same, maybe a little faster. And if I could shave off about 10 minutes on the swim, I could be right there. So I took about from 2016 to 2017. So I think that race was in August of 2016, if I remember right. So after that, I obviously took a break, and then I went and decided I was going to work on my run. And then I thought I'd sign up for a few marathons and see how that went. And then I got to training a little bit harder on marathon training, and I saw that my times were fairly close to Boston qualifying times. So I was like, well, let's shoot for a Boston qualifying spot first and see how that goes. So I picked up a few tips and some running books. There was one, I think it was Runner's World, has an actual Boston Marathon qualifying training plan. It has you running only 3 days a week, but it has specific times of what you should be hitting in your age group to kind of compare against and see if you can make it. So I was doing those 3 key runs, but in between I was running 5 to 6 days a week. And then I just started out slowly. I pretty much gave up the bike. I maybe rode it 3 times a month, 4 times at most. And then I didn't swim at all, and no weightlifting either. And I went, just started slowly ramping up my miles. Started at typical 20 miles a week, and just tried to stay consistent with running 30 minutes a day, 5-6 days a week. And then I went gradually 10% each week up, and got to a point where, hold on, okay, some water. Got to a point where I was up running 45 minutes a day, 6 days a week. Anywhere from 5 to 7 miles a day. And then I got up to around 45 to 50 miles a week. And then I got to a point where I needed to run twice a day. And then so I started introducing 2-a-day runs, and got up to, peaked at about 70 miles for 2 weeks, leading up to my Salt Lake City Marathon in 2017. And I felt like I was doing pretty good. And then I went and tried qualifying at the Salt Lake City Marathon. So when I signed up for the Salt Lake City Marathon, I didn't do the proper research on if it was a good course to try and qualify on. Come to find out, it was not. It's a very, the first 6-7 miles are downhill, but the rest of it is very tough. And I was on pace for about 14-15 miles. And then my paces started dropping significantly. And then mile 23 comes, and I start to get in a really dark place. And I see that I'm falling off pace pretty quick. And I know I'm within a few seconds to a minute of qualifying time, and I just couldn't keep it together. And I'm coming down the final stretch, and I start to black out. I stagger into the finish line, and I pass out, just black out right at the finish line. And the best part of that was my wife and my 5-year-old son were pretty much standing right there at the finish line, just on that other side of the fence, and they watched me collapse. So she came around real quick, and I got ushered into the medical tent, dragged basically into the medical tent. And I woke up, and the first thought was that I didn't actually cross the finish line. So I kept asking if I crossed the finish line. They assured me that I had, and then of course my next question was, did I make it? Did I make it in time? And my wife Autumn told me that no, I'm sorry, you missed it by 26 seconds. So it was 3:10:26 was my time. I had to get a 3:10 or better. And I know even with getting a 3:10 or better, I wouldn't have actually got into Boston, but the bragging rights of actually Boston qualifying was what I wanted. I did want to get in, but so I failed there by 26 seconds to Boston qualify. So after that, I wanted to just throw my shoes out the door and quit. But after some encouraging words from some buddies, I kept running, and I signed up for a much easier cheater downhill marathon, the Big Cottonwood Canyon Marathon here in wonderful Salt Lake City. Starts out at like 9,000 feet up in top of this mountain and drops down to 5,000 feet. So there's somewhere between 4,000 to 4,500 feet of drop, and there's only like 2 miles of maybe total of 3 miles of flat and maybe a little bit uphill, which is actually kind of welcome, and that comes up like mile 18 or 19. So I was on pace, and I was able to smash my goal and smash it, and came right in at 2:59:59, .5999, and I qualified, and I got in. So went to Boston in 2018 and did that. That was the year that it just absolutely poured rain. Here in Salt Lake we get a little bit of rain, but nothing. I've never really experienced the type of rain that the Bostonians get out there, and it was just torrential downpour. For me it was, and it was cold. And starting temperature was 38 degrees, and once you're wet, you're wet. So shoes were just sopping wet, feet were sopping wet for the entire race. But it was the Boston Marathon, so I loved it. Loved every single minute of it. And then after that, I knew that I wanted to get back up, signing up for a full Ironman and qualify for Kona. So I performed well at Boulder. I had looked at some other ones, but Boulder just fits my riding style, and I'm native of Colorado, and just Colorado has a special place in my heart. So signed up for Ironman Boulder and got back to it. So my training, I don't have a coach, self-trained, and the subscription I pay for, and I think is the best thing in the world, is Trainer Road. I've been using that since 2014, I think, and just an early adapter of them from when they were first starting out, and I've just loved their product ever since. And I do 95% of my rides indoors, and I just love it. The structure, the plans that they have are just spot on, and they just fit me perfectly. I don't mind watching Netflix or playing PlayStation for 4 hours on a trainer ride, and suffering. It's all good for me. So I went. I started training, just keeping my running consistent and my biking consistent, and then my swimming. I had to get back into swimming, and like I said at the beginning, I am a horrible swimmer compared to the rest of the field. My previous times, Coeur d'Alene, I did an hour 13, which is decent, and then Boulder, the Boulder full, I did an hour 23. My legs cramped up and I just sucked, and then I had to suffer in with cramped legs and do an hour 23, which is horrendous. At most of my halves that I've done, St. George half, some of the hits ones that I did, usually it's like between 37 to 40 minutes, which I know is not good. So I had to work on my swim, which I just thought, just get in the pool and just start putting in the yards and the hours, see if I can get any better. And so I just kept consistent training from months in, months out. I ramped up consistently above 12 to 15 hours a week, and then when I started getting hot and heavy into it, starting in January of 2019, I started getting up into the 18 to 20 hours a week, and so which would consist of me, getting up at 4:35 in the morning, doing an hour and a half ride, and then doing a brick run right after that of a minimum of 30 minutes, which would give me anywhere from 4 to 4.5 miles or whatever. And then lunchtime, I would swim, and for anywhere from 50 to an hour, which would give me about anywhere from 3,000 to 3,500 yards. And then at night, I do have 3 boys, so I would spend time with my family. I would put them to bed, and then I would do another run at night, depending where I was at running wise. I would put in anywhere from 5 to 8 miles, depending on where I was at in my ramp. So I did about 4-week blocks, and I would ramp up for 4 weeks, and then I'd take a 5th week of kind of a rest week, or not a taper, but it would be a rest week where I would drop down to 10 to 12 hours for that week. And then I'd start back up the next week, and then do another 4-week ramp, and another, on the 5th week I would rest. I did that the best I could. Regardless, I just tried to stay consistent with my training and keep a solid, high volume approach. I am a believer of the low volume. I'm a believer of the high volume, but for me personally, high volume is what I wanted to do. It's worked for me in the past, and with some of the higher intensity, lower volume stuff, I strained my Achilles a few times doing that, so thought I would just back off and do a little bit of the slower stuff. I did still keep some of the key runs with a tempo run, and obviously the long runs. The actual speed runs I didn't really ever do. And then the bike, I just kept heavy on the bike. Weekends I would do 4 to 5 hour trainer road rides, and they suited me just fine. And that was about between 65 to 69 IF, and got my run up to averaging anywhere from 40 to 45 miles per week, and then ramping up into February, March, April. I started getting up into the 50, 55, and then I peaked running at about 60, and peaked bike at about 320, and then I peaked with my swimming at about 18,000 yards, which I know isn't significant. The running I felt was on target, and my bike I felt was on target. And then again with my swimming, I was able to improve. I was able to drop my 100 times from a minute 30, 100 down to about a minute 21, a minute 22 consistently in the pool. But I hadn't done any outdoor open water swims. And so I did sign up for St. George 70.3 in May, and I went down a few times. I went down once before and swam with a buddy, and a few weeks prior to the race, and it wasn't fantastic. For some reason, my times were way off. Went from, obviously the pool was about a minute 20, 22. In the open water, I get up into the 145 to 150s for some reason. I need to get a coach for that. I suck at swimming, I know. So St. George came up, half Ironman. My swim was 39 minutes. I was shooting for 37. And then my bike was pretty good at 2 hours, 21 minutes. And then I ran a 7:30 minute mile for the half marathon. And I came in 33rd place in that race. There were some fast dudes there, incredibly fast. Those guys are amazing. So I was really happy. I think, so my overall time was 4:47, and I was happy with it. And I felt like that was a great setup for Boulder. And so for the next week after St. George, I went straight into a high block of training for the next 3 weeks. I kept it high. I think I did 20 hours that week after St. George, and then week after that was 22 hours, and then the week after that was 25. And that's where I was telling you earlier about my peaks, around 300, 350 biking, 60 running, and 18K swimming. And then I started my taper about 2.5 weeks and dropped off my volume, but I kept my intensity, up my intensity for the following few weeks, where I, instead of doing an hour and a half at 68 or 70% or whatever, I did an hour at 80% IF, and then did that for the next week after that as well. So the week prior to the race, I was only doing 45-minute bikes at 0.85 IF and 0.9. My runs were, I still kept the 30-minute running, and ran a little quicker on each one of those, and just tried to keep my intensity up. And then got plenty of sleep. I think that was a big key for me as well. The past 6 months is focusing on my sleep and recovery. And then leading the week of, just basically a couple hours just staying loose and keeping the stress level low, and getting everything packed, heading out to Boulder. It's about an 8-hour drive from Salt Lake, so not too bad. My chauffeur, my wife, drove the whole way, which I loved, and got to Boulder. We had a VRBO there in this cute little section of town. Had this little house in the back. It was adorable. And then got there on Thursday, and then had Friday to check in, do the whole Athletes Village, all that junk, and then get a couple a run and a ride in, just nothing too significant, 10-20 minutes. Tried to go swim at the Boulder Res, and got all suited up with my wetsuit, all zipped up, snugged up, and got in the water, swam about 200 yards just in that little lifeguard area they have, and they blew the whistle because there was some lightning, and so I had to get out and stop swimming after 200 yards. So that was fun. And then Saturday, I just did a light run and then just did a bike check, and then went up to the res I did that. I did that up at the reservoir. Did the bike check and a light run, and checked my bike in, and then I left, and then just hung out the rest of the day. Ate some good Italian pasta. I still believe in the carb loading a little bit, and just stayed off my feet. Got all my bags ready, and of course, all the nerves running through you. Tried to get just stay off my feet mostly, and then of course Sunday morning comes, and got up at 3:30. Had all my bags packed the night before, everything, and loaded it in the car, and drove down. Got a good spot in the parking garage, so just a 2-block walk to the buses. And as I got to the buses, I realized I didn't have my special needs bag for the bike, but I wasn't. My wife volunteered to go back and get it, but I was like, it's not a huge deal. All I had was an extra bottle of my EFS mix, concentrated bottle of that, and I think a sandwich. But I was like, it's not a big deal. I'll just supplement on the course. And so got up to the res, plenty of time, got into transition to get my bottles all in, and start pumping up my tires. Borrowed a pump, and my front tire or my back tire wouldn't pump up. So come to find out, I had a flat tire. I don't know how, it just wasn't blown up. So I had to go over to the mechanics. They helped me out. They switched it for me. I had to wait about 15-20 minutes because they were helping this one dude with their Di2 wire, trying to splice it, and they told him that he was pretty much stuck in one gear for the whole race. So I felt like I had it pretty good, just a flat tire to repair. And that actually helped calm some of my nerves, because it was, I was of course nervous, and I had something to focus on other than my nerves, which was getting my bike ready to go. And then I started to have pretty bad, I don't know, not a panic attack, but it was just nerves coming up with all the training that I've done and everything that I put into it, and if I was good enough to actually perform that day. Good thing my wife was there, and she was great support. Got on the start line, lined up at between the 115 to 120 guys. Tried to line up a little bit in the front of that 115 group, because that was my goal, was between 115 to 120 was what I was shooting for. And I loved the rolling star, the time start of, it's like a person every 2 or 3 seconds or something. It was awesome. Of course, it did take a little bit longer to get in the water, and just didn't touch anybody for the first. I didn't touch anybody for the first probably 800 to 1,000 yards. I did run headfirst into the buoy and fought a little bit with that guy, and then of course at the turns, the first turn, everybody converges in, and and then it spreads back out. I felt great the whole swim. It was comfortable. I have the Roka Maverick X wetsuit. I got it on when they do their half off clearance or whatever. So got it for I think $400, and it's a great wetsuit, and felt fantastic. I didn't feel cold, and I just had the regular swim cap on, and I didn't have neoprene booties or anything either, just normal wetsuit and normal cap. Got in to the ramp, checked my watch, and it was right on 115 when I crossed that mat, and I was stoked. I know that's not a fantastic swim for most of you guys, for most of the top age groupers. It's really subpar for them, but for me, I was excited because doing a 39 in St. George had me worried. So to do an hour 15, I knew that I was on target for what I had to do, because I knew I could crush it on the bike. Got out on the bike, fine. Can't really get into a groove to get out of the reservoir area and on that main road. And I just started hammering. Felt great. I always feel great coming out of the water. Maybe that's because I don't swim hard enough. And just started hammering on that first loop. And my best bike split plan was to be around 210 watts, and I think 215 or 213 normalized power, somewhere in that range. And I was up near 220 watts, and even hitting up to 240, 250 watts for an extended period of time. And I knew I was going pretty hard, and I knew I was pushing it hard, but I always feel behind on the bike, and I feel like I can make up some time. So I just started passing people, and it's just a blast for me. I love the bike so much, to just fly and just tuck and go. On one of the hills, though, I dropped my chain and started spinning and tried to unclip. Didn't quite unclip on time and fell over like a moron. And there was a guy standing right there, of all places. It was this long road, and there was one guy just standing 5 feet from me, and he had a good little chuckle. And got that fixed, got back on, and started to try to go again. And the shifters got caught up, and it didn't shift right, so I ended up falling over again. This time I it scraped up my knee. Got a good little, well, it's almost healed now, but a good little gash in my leg, so it was bleeding down my knee. And started to go, and felt like my brake was rubbing, so I got off, spun my wheel, and it was just caught, and it wasn't going. And so I was like, crap. I was trying to peel my brake back to bend it back, and it didn't look like it was rubbing. Then I look up, and my bottle cage had broke and went in between my frame and my wheel, so it was jammed in there, my bottle cage, just dangling there. So I lift that up, and luckily I had some extra electrical tape there for some other stuff, my tire repair kit, so I just wrapped that around it real quick, and it stayed. And I punctured my water bottle, so there was a little tiny hole in my water bottle, so that was dripping out of the back. But I was back riding. So between those two little stupid mishaps, it cost me about 2.5 to 3 minutes of no progress. And so I just kept going on the first loop, as tough and hard as I could go. And I knew it was hard. Got around the first lap in about 2:20, and then the second loop started, and I knew I had to back off, and it just naturally came because my legs were starting to get fried a little bit. So I backed my power off down to 220, then started falling down to 210 to 200. So got through the second lap flawlessly without any stupid incidents of dropping my chain or falling over. Continue to pass some of the guys in my age group, and hydrated perfectly well. I went on the bike probably 4 or 5 times, and felt like I ate a full Cliff Bar and half of a Fig Bar. So total I was about 250 to 300 calories an hour, and I used EFS and Carb Rocket, and I just concentrated a couple bottles, had 2 in the back, and then I had my Aero bottle there. And then near some of the aid stations, I supplemented with some Gatorade. I think I had two full Gatorades, or maybe 3. So overall, it was about 250 to 300 calories an hour, and anywhere from 24 to maybe 40 ounces per hour, and I felt great. And then coming in, came in to the res, and the bike, I thought the course was going to be 112, and so I was kind of surprised and elated when it was at only like 110 coming in, and so my total time was 4:45, I think, or Yeah, I can't remember exactly, somewhere in there. And got off the bike, feeling pretty good, and went and started the run. And I did have to stop at the porta potty again, right at the exit. And my wife was right there, and she was yelling at me, "Hey, you're first in your age group off the bike, and you're in 5th place overall." So I had the fastest bike split that she told me, and I was pretty excited. I knew I was going to be somewhere in the top, 5 to 7 of my age group, because I usually am. But to be first, that was pretty motivating. Get out on the run, and there's nobody really around. A couple guys, right in front and back of me. Passed a few of them, and I did pass one guy in my age group almost immediately off the bike, just about a mile and a half, 2 miles, and so I was alone on the run. Felt like for 5 or 6 miles just by myself. Felt like just a long training day. It was really peaceful, and got to about mile 12, 13, and started seeing one of my competitors, Kyle Lewis, catching up to me. I could see him at the turnarounds, and I'd scoped him out before and knew that he was one of the ones I had to beat. He beat me at St. George by a substantial amount, and he's got quite a bit of experience, a bunch of other races, had some great times, and he lives just 15, 20 minutes from here, in a fantastic tri group, and he's got a fantastic coach. So it obviously scared me, and put a little motivation in me to to keep going a little harder than I wanted to. And I just kept sipping. I have a little sippy bottle that I carry with me, and keep that. I started with a pretty concentrated with EFS, a little bit of Carb Rocket, a little bit of Zip Fizz, a little bit of everything, and then I would just dilute it at the aid stations. I just unscrew it. They would fill it up with a little bit of water, and then I would just keep going. Mile, like I said, Kyle kept getting on me at the turnarounds. I could see him just getting a little closer. And then I think about mile 21, 22, he finally passed me. And I knew he started in front of me on the swim, because he's a much stronger swimmer, so I knew I had a little buffer. But I was like, I just cannot let him get ahead. I just got to keep him in sight. And then at 22 and a half, my wife caught me and found me on the trail, and she started screaming at me that I was so close. I was in 5th place, but it's super close, and Kyle was the one I had to beat. He was the one, and he said that number 1, Greg Lindquist, was not looking good. He started walking. The number 2 or number 3 guy was not looking good. He was looking like he was in a lot of hurt, and I felt decent. Of course, my times had dropped from my plan of 8-minute mile. They had dropped down to an 8:30. So she just screaming at me that you got to get going, and she just takes and she just slaps me on my butt. And with the wet spandex, it felt fantastic. Gave me a good little stinger for about a half a mile. Got my mind off the pain in my legs, and moved it to my butt. And that was a good little motivating spank, though. So at this time, Kyle just keeps kind of running away from me. He did walk one of the aid stations right in front of me, and I was able to pass him just for like a minute, and then he zoomed right past me again. And then at mile 24, you kind of start seeing people coming back, and I see Greg Lindquist, guy, Everyman Jack, walking, and at this time he had moved back pretty far in the rankings, but I see a couple of other guys that I was scoping out that I knew I had to beat or keep close to. Start seeing them passing, and I'm like, oh man, I got to turn it up. And then there was Kyle, and he hit the turnaround at 25, and you're pretty much home free. Got a little downhill, going under the bridge and back up, and you loop around, and you're home. obviously super motivating and just a great feeling. Crossed the line in 9:50:10 was my finishing time, and then found Kyle was at the finish line, and congratulated him. Got to talk to him a little bit. At this time, we had no idea of the standings, of actually where we both were. Just happy to be done with it, and then come to find out, he had finished in 9:50:18 or 19, and mine was 9:50:10, and he was. So I was fifth. I came in fifth, and he came in sixth. I mean, it could have fell either way. Is just shocking of how close a 10-hour day comes down to 8-9 seconds. I mean, anything either one of us could have done could have went either way. He was a fantastic sport, and I mean, it was a battle that you don't really know that you're in. That it should be that close. That's that close. You just don't think it's going to come down to seconds in a 10-hour race, but it did. And then I thought there was going to only be 3 spots for Kona, so I was like, well, I missed it. Either way, 5th place doesn't cut it. Then the next so award ceremony comes the next day, and 5th place it's podium, and which I was happy to get my little medal.
The men 35-39 in 5th place from Harriman, Utah with 9:50:10, Nathan Zarlengo.
So the award ceremony and the roll down ceremony are 2 different ceremonies. They do the award ceremony, and then 15 minutes later they do the roll down ceremony. So had to wait, and of course, just gonna wait around just to be part of the roll down ceremony, just by see if there's any luck that 2 people out of the 3 don't take it. And so Mike Riley rattles through the couple of age groups, comes down to 35-39, and says, okay, 35-39, there's 4 spots. And I was standing back there, and my heart just sank, because I thought there was only 3, there's 4, so now I only missed it by 1 spot. And I knew the 4th place guy was going to take it for sure, because my wife had talked to his family, and we had kind of scoped him out before, and he was going to take it for sure. So I was thinking, crap, there goes my chance. 1 spot away, which was I think 6 or 7 minutes to beat him. So I'm just devastated, hurled over. I started to cry a little bit, just from devastation. Even though I know I had a good race, I was still devastated. And then to get your Kona slot, you actually physically have to be there, and you have to go up and say yes. First place, James O'Sullivan, will you take your spot to Kona? Yes. And then he walks up, gets the lay, walks back, and then second place, Carl, I think it was, he of course takes it. Third place, Benedict, you here? And then it's just silence. Benedict going once, okay, Benedict going twice, okay, we're moving on. And so at this point, I'm still hurled over with devastation emotions, and I don't really get what's going on. My wife gets it. She goes up and starts to record, because she knows what that means, that it rolls down. And then 4th place gets called up, and Subramini, and he gets called up. Of course, he takes it. And so before I know it, within 10-15 seconds, Mike Riley's calling my name. Nate Zarlengo, you here? And I come up, and I lose it, and of course I'm going to take it. You're going to Kona, and so put the lay on me, and it's done. I get to go to Kona, and then you go, of course, go give them your credit card, pay $1,100. But walked over to the line, and Benedict was there, and he says, congratulations. That was my spot, and I just couldn't go this year. But I am so happy to see your joy and your excitement, and that you get to go. And I mean, a dream come true, honestly, for me, for all the early hours, late nights, weekends of just burying myself and training and putting yourself out there. And I know it's kind of corny to say, but when you say things like this, that I want to go to Kona, you actually have to believe it. I had to, when I was telling people, I wasn't really believing it at first, and then later on I was like, if I want to go, I've got to believe what I say and believe in myself. So I started to believe in myself when I tell people that, and then when I was training, I envisioned that moment of Mike Riley calling me up there hundreds of times in that exact scenario. So for it to come true has just been a memory of a lifetime. So that's my recap of the last couple years of my quest for Kona.
There's Nate. You had no idea, did you? No. Let's hear it for Nate. He's pretty emotional. He's going to Kona. Wow. Rolled down to that 5th spot. A dream come true for Nathan.